The fish, the most nutritious one is the sardine. So it's a little tiny one, and the sardine gets eaten by another fish, and it keeps getting all the way up to the shark. And you'd think the shark must be the most vegetative one because they're so dangerous. But really, if the sardine didn't exist, the little tiny one, the shark wouldn't be able to do the job that it does. And so take that analogy into business, right? The large sharks need small little sardines in order for them to get vegetated and grow. And so that's how the explosion of exponential growth kicks into play. But there is a science behind it.
Welcome to Super Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Shahid Durrani. Today we have with us Nader Sabry. Nader has been described by his peers as the guy you don't want your competition to hire for his innovative growth strategies that have propelled businesses to unprecedented success. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure. A lot of people may not understand there's an art to it. They may think that you're just being overly excited and maybe trying to manipulate something, but I'm very much excited to learn more about this concept of 10x growth hacking. So can you define in your own words what it means in the context of business, and why has it become such a buzzworthy concept in the entrepreneur world?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll break it down into two parts: growth hacking and 10x.
Yes,
so
please.
Two completely different things, but they interconnect with each other in a very interesting way. So we'll start with growth hacking. So growth hacking is something that's been happening for a very long time, actually. So it sounds really new because it was only coined like a decade and a half ago, which sounds like a long time ago, but isn't. And it was essentially because you had a group of people who were applying these really advanced strategies to grow companies out of the blue. And so they were just like, they had these phenomenal growth patterns, and there was very little to understand how it was happening. So it was just called growth hacking. But in reality, growth hacking has been happening across all industries at all levels, and it's been happening for a very long time. So in my book, Ready, Set, Growth Hack, one of the ones I talk about to demonstrate this is McDonald's. Roughly, I think it was maybe in the 60s, McDonald's had actually invented the billboards on the freeway, which was not the billboard itself, but they invented the drive-through, right? So the billboards didn't exist, so they would actually go build them, put them, then they put a picture of a burger and say, hey, come through the drive-through, and they would put it in a place where they knew there was a lot of traffic. So people coming home at 5, 6, 7 p.m. would see that and know, hey, I can pick up some food on the way. And so that precedent had not existed. That strategy wasn't there, and they essentially invented that and developed that growth strategy over many years, and everything from not just being drive-through, but 24-hour drive-through, and simplifying that. So it starts in a really simple place. Traditional businesses can do it, but those who are the best at it and best known for it are tech companies. And it's not just because they are tech companies, it's because there's something in the mindset and the culture around tech companies where they are more adapt to dealing with growth hacking than a more traditional business. And that would launch us into the 10x conversation, basically, where so 10x is, I've been challenged this many times before, and there's actually a science behind it. And before I go on, by the way, so growth hacking, we now refer to it as a growth science because it's been developing. And I'll give a bit more story behind that a bit later on. But we'll jump into the 10x part, which gets a lot of people excited. So 10x has been something that's been way overused as a concept, and it's really interesting because it gets people drawn in, but there's an actual science behind it. And it stems from the growth sciences itself. And there's some old but not so popular interviews with Steve Jobs. Okay, so believe it or not, he goes actually quite deep into this, and you won't find many of these interviews. They're out there. And he starts talking about the philosophy of incremental innovation versus taking a leap and being innovative. And he'd say, every time we do this, we want a 10x. We're not looking for a 1x. We're not looking for a 0.1. We're looking to 10x. And so to do that, we need to have the systems. We need to have the mindset. We need to have the technology in order to do that. And that was the thinking around it. And the same thing when it comes to a business. So when I walk into a company, especially the larger companies who have incremental growth patterns, it's instrumental that it's embedded really deep inside them. And it's because it's culturally developed like that. So when you go to Harvard Business School, they don't teach you the growth sciences. They're starting to teach it now, but you'd be taught how to grow an organization incrementally. So you'd be
logicy.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd be like sticking to the Excel sheet. Let's stay in between the lines kind of thing. No offense to any of that, but that's all good stuff. But that doesn't work alone.
There's no excitement there.
Exactly. See, it comes down to top down and bottom up growth. So 99% of what an organization would do is incremental and bottom up growth. Anything, so the secret is, I say, anything starts with an RE. So restructure, rethink, reorganize, reoptimize. All that means is you're re-resourcing. So I'm using the same resource, but I'm using it in another way. And there's nothing wrong with that. You need to be using that type of growth, but it's only incremental. It won't give you exponential growth or the 10x you're looking for. In order to do that, you need to be looking at things very differently. You need to be looking from the top-down type of growth. And that is essentially breaking the boundaries of the existing revenue that you have. And that's identifying models and new ways of being able to use of course, existing resources, but also creating new resources out of them. So let's put into a practical example. When you look at an organization like Alphabet, their growth, because as they get bigger and bigger, comes from acquisitions, right? And so in order to have that mindset, that agility, and be able to grow exponentially and continue to do that, they can't do it the same way they can if they were to buy a company or invest in a company that can do that. And that's where the CVCs come into play and the whole innovation ecosystem. So if any of you are listening who are playing in that space, this is a very good way for you to plug into some of the larger targets and organizations who need you because they need you to grow. And so there's an analogy and ask people like, hey, what's the most nutritious fish in the whole fish ecosystem? And if you just keep going down the food chain of fish, the most nutritious one is the sardine, right? So it's a little tiny one, and sardine gets eaten by another fish, and it keeps getting all the way up to the shark. And you'd think the shark must be the most vegetative one because they're so dangerous. But really, if the sardine didn't exist, the little tiny one, the shark wouldn't be able to do the job that it does. And so take that analogy into business, right? The large sharks need small little sardines in order for them to get vegetated and grow. And so that's how the explosion of exponential growth kicks into play. But there is a science behind it. And when I first started to explore it, I started to ask myself some very simple questions that I do discuss in my book. Things like, why does one company grow and another company doesn't grow? And I looked over the last 25 years in building companies and investing in companies, and why would some grow and why some wouldn't grow? And it sounded really simple and it got the ball rolling, but there was a lot more to these patterns. Things like, why would a company start not growing and then eventually grow? And why would one not grow and continue not to grow? Why would one grow and not grow? And then I would look at the different variables and start to analyze different companies that I've worked with and other ones out there and building the data around it to understand the different growth patterns. And that's where I started to understand the growth sciences in a much deeper way and work with clients and educate people on how that would work in an organization for you. So as I did that, that was the first book I wrote, which is this one here. It's Ready, Set, Growth Hack. I don't know if that fits on the screen there, but there you go. So what happened next was that wasn't enough, because as these unicorns and Fortune 500s and different people reading it, it's like, there needs to be more to this. Like, we get it. What's the next thing to this? And so then I looked at developing a methodology, which is called growth thinking. And growth thinking is essentially, think of it like design thinking, but for growth. The visual approach to a structure to being able to develop a growth strategy and then apply it and be able to do the next part of it. What happened was that it started to get popularized and then it started to get used at some of the big universities like Harvard. Now, it's not part of the curriculum, but part of the tool set they used. And there was people who wrote different articles about it, and they started getting a little bit deeper into it. And then I challenged myself. I said, what's the next level of disrupting this? And that's when I created something called the 10-day growth hacking challenge. And it's $1 million challenge broken down to $10,000 challenges. And we would use this methodology to show anybody through educational videos. So you can watch it all for free on YouTube, and we can talk about it at the end, but it's an excellent resource for anybody that's listening. So if you're in the back of your mind, you're now like, dude, I'm too small, or my industry is too narrow, or things are too complex, or I don't have the resources, like everything that you're thinking about now that there's an objection to, you'll actually see the truth of how it actually would work with normal everyday entrepreneurs of all walks of life that have used this in its work. And we did that intentionally. People from all over the world, different levels of growth, people with different backgrounds. And we challenged ourselves by bringing in the growth thinking to actually show it. And we demonstrate it through these videos. So every contender has 5 videos, and there are 5 contenders per season. And you can go through and watch that. The secret to watching these, though, from an educational perspective is don't go look for an entrepreneur or a business that's similar to yours. So if you're in the healthcare industry, don't go look for the healthcare guys. They'll be there. But what you want to do is you want to be learning from other parallel industries, people who are using growth sciences in order to be able to grow in their industries in their ways, and being able to take that and understand how it would apply to you in your industry, because that will spark a much higher level of creativity that you can tap into exponential growth.
Wow, that's wonderful. So when it comes to the thinking part, does it involve thinking big?
Thinking very differently. So how it's not necessarily big. It's good to think big, but the way you need to look at it is looking into the unseen. So I'll give you a really good example. So one of the first things that happen when I meet a client for the first time, they usually will talk to me about some benchmarks or measures that are quite standard in their industry, right? And they say, we're not doing so well at this measure and we want to get better at it, but our competitors are doing A, B, and C levels on the following measure. And I tell them, okay, what if that measure isn't really the reason why you're not growing? Or what if you were to create a whole new measure? Or what if there was a measure you didn't look at that you need to be looking at? And so the first problem is the mindset, because they'd be like, our industry just works like that. If your industry just works like that and you stick to the same way of doing things, you're only going to grow incrementally. You're just going to compete on price, doing it faster, better, easier, or price. These are just the general parameters you're going to be using. You're not going to grow exponentially. So to think about it, you got to be thinking about going into the unknown. And the unknown is a very scary area for many people. Okay, it's like, I'm not going to go and take risk. And the biggest risk is not taking the risk itself. In fact, I found that the 90+% of the growth strategies that we develop come completely out of the blue, like in the unknown areas. Okay. And on the challenge, there's some excellent examples of this. One of my favorite examples is we have a guy named the Iceman. So he's like Wim Hof. He actually beat his record, but not officially. And he trains people to think mind over body, and he'll train you how to do it, breathing techniques. And then he puts you into the ice, and then he tests for how long you can stay in the ice. And he needed to grow his business, right, for ice therapy. And so what we did is we started experimenting by changing the color of the water. So completely, no one in the industry had thought of, like, why would you change the color of the water? And this is a hack that comes actually from one of my clients in some other industry, like completely different industry. So we experimented with different colors, and we found that the color blue, a specific type of color blue, would actually psychologically make people last longer in the water. And then we started to identify what essences would work with it. So through the manipulation of color, and people would normally last longer and have a much better experience using his service. And he was able to yield a premium almost 3 times more than anybody in the industry because of the experience that he was able to give. Now, there's a lot more to it than that. You can watch and see the details and how we built on that to grow exponentially. So the purpose I'm telling you this is it can be something really small and simple, and it usually is, but most people are overlooking it. And the funny thing is that he's been doing this for 3 years now. Nobody has actually decoded it. So the life cycle of a growth hack, I call it like a growth hack is like milk. It has an expiry date. And so naturally, the best growth hacks in the world are secrets. No one is going to really tell you about them. Yeah.
Nader, what percentage would you say this process is mindset and what percentage is strategy?
I would say 15 to 20% is mindset. I don't want to underplay it because it's really important. The way you think determines everything moving forward, including your strategy. The remaining would be 30% would be strategy, and the last 50% is execution. And the vital secret behind the execution is the ability to learn, and quickly. And that stems from a very interesting experience I had working, especially with Fortune 500. So I'd be hired to come in to help them grow, walk into the boardroom. And I call this the boardroom ego. So you walk in and I'm here to help solve a growth problem, but everybody seems to have the answer when I'm in the boardroom. I was like, no, we understand it, we know, and all that. And it's a very difficult situation to break through. I learned a very interesting way to break through.
That sounds mindset too.
It is mindset. Yeah. Like we know our business better than you, but we just need your help, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I tell them, like, it's comical because, like, why do you need me?
Yeah.
Obviously they do. And I'm here, so we may as well make it work. So I get everybody at the table to agree to a statement. And that statement is, let's all agree to the statement that I don't know. Okay. And the power behind the idea is, let's quote unquote, I don't know, is it only leaves one thing in front of us, and that's experimentation, right? So if we don't know, we need to experiment to find our way. And that opens up our mindset to be looking at things, not just in a different way, but going to places we never tried.
Exactly.
And that's where you find the growth.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds majority mindset. You can change it, you can move it, change the terminology, whatever, but it comes back to the human being behind it, what they look at as logical or what they look at as illogical, what they think that they're able to do and not able to do. What execution should I do this? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm not able to. So there's a lot to do with the energy behind that human being that will take these creative steps and these things that they would never imagine otherwise that they would do. For example, the way we enjoy the skies now was illogical, something that was created out of being illogical, having that belief, the inner mindset that, no, wait a minute, if birds can do it, we can do it. Well, same way, 10x, the growth hacking is you got to have that belief. I just feel like it's mindset.
Yep. So belief is such an interesting thing because a life experience that I had. So the most interesting professional experience I had was working with NASA. Okay. And when I went with them, and we were talking about the connection of spirituality and technology in space industry. And it's the strangest combination in the world. And so here I am being inaugurated.
So much alignment though.
There is, but it's not so obvious immediately. And so it was scary for me because I'm being inaugurated the first day. I'm going to talk to these 800 scientists and engineers. And here I'm going to talk about something completely way off base, right? And to my surprise, and this was the most enlightening thing that I had in my whole experience dealing with them, was that if you're going to break the boundaries of science and technology, you must believe, because there's nothing else in front of you but belief. There's no precedence. There's no benchmark. There's no measure until you get to it.
Faith and belief. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like even tech companies that you mentioned, some billionaires or some of the largest startups, you'll hear stories about them going on those retreats for psychedelics, for example, right? And connecting to the spirituality and downloading those ideas, because I feel like there's an alignment between science and spirituality. Maybe science is catching up. The more science digs in, the more there's an alignment, which is just so cool.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's why, like, when I went down the path of meditation, and it didn't work out very well for me. Like sitting still and just it just wasn't working.
You got to do it. You got to keep doing it. Trust me. If you hang in there, and the people that I work with, we always tell them, listen, you only dislike it or not like it because you have this image or this concept in your subconscious about it. But if you start telling yourself you like it and you start gravitating towards it, give it a try, over time, you'll start noticing, wow, like we've seen this. They start things that they never thought that they will like, they love. And then the ones that they love, they don't like anymore. You have that power to make those changes in your subconscious mind, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's when I discovered Jose Silva, who talked about the idea of different types of meditation. So it's not like the one path. And he talked about the idea of tapping into energy, the energy waves, right? The delta, the alpha, beta, delta.
The brain waves.
The waves, exactly. So he said there's all this information floating around you. And so when you're buzzing and you're tapping into those energies, and that's where some of your intuition, actually potentially a lot of your intuition can actually come from. Some people call it leadership from the field, right? And so from the field, like a...
the quantum field, or there's different words for it. Right?
Exactly. So something is coming through this energy field, but it's also a form of meditation. And then when I learned about that, really opened me up. And then I discovered Joe Dispenza, who also comes from that school of thought.
Very good.
Yeah. Yes. And I was like, dude, no, that's more. I'm still learning. I'm no expert in it. We're still learning. Yeah.
Deep transformations happen. You feel like the personality you have is just a personality based on the environment that you were brought up in. And I read somewhere, I mentioned in another episode too, but you might find this fascinating as well, that we have 8 billion plus worlds. And he said, how come? It was in a podcast or something. I can't remember where I saw it. And he said, how come? And basically they're saying every individual has their own world, their own experience. Every single human being has a completely different experience of the world, how they perceive it, how they engage with it. When you shift that personality, you basically create a new world. And what I'm seeing is that's the 10x, the growth hack, that's the quantum leap that occurs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So excited,
Exactly.
man.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is awesome.
it's fascinating because
Yeah.
no matter how much you
Yeah.
learn, you find out how much you actually don't know. And
Yeah.
it's this consistent pursuit of learning and just being open to the world around you. So at some point, like I was trying
Yeah.
to discover my own purpose. And so I went down the path
Yeah.
of start with why, and Simon Sinek is brilliant.
Yeah.
I went through his course and everything, but I came up with
Yeah.
nothing at the end, and I was like disappointed. I came a little bit depressed. I was like, come on, man, am I really going to live life without purpose? And then I had discovered the most
Yeah.
fascinating part, which was my purpose was to discover the purpose. And that's what
Yeah.
really opened me up to exploring things on a completely different level and in a much deeper way. Keeps you on that consistent pursuit of purpose, because sometimes we're not just built to do one thing. We're built to do multiple things, and multiple things at different times as well.
Yeah.
It's a bit difficult to
We
grasp
have
initially, but yeah.
we have incredible levels of potential. We just hold ourselves back. We could be our worst enemy. It's unfortunate because a lot of people that go into business or entrepreneurship, there is so much excitement, what you could do for your family, what you could do for others, what kind of legacy you can leave. There's a lot of emotions behind entrepreneurship. But when they get into it, they realize, wait a minute, I know all these strategies, but nothing is freaking working. What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And you get into that really frustrated existence. And then something happens, someone says something, then you realize, wait a minute, I got to go within. There's a foundation I need to look at. But COVID brought that realization. There's a lot more people realizing it since then. But before COVID, that awareness wasn't there, I feel.
No, big time. You touched on something very interesting. So when I first started my career, I was failing for one of those actual reasons. So I would go read a bunch of books and I'd listen to a whole bunch of things. I'd go to consultants and everyone would give you a formula. This is the way it works.
Yeah.
And then you go
do this.
Exactly. And I go and I do it. And either I don't get any result or some minimal result in comparison to the promise. And I'd be disappointed. So I'd move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And it just wouldn't work. And so when I wrote my book, the first thing I tell people is I'm not here to tell you what the formula is. I'm here to help you find your own growth formula. And I tell my clients the exact same thing. So there's no set formula I'm going to take off the shelf because it doesn't exist. Okay. If that scares you, then we're at a very positive point. Because it should scare you enough to know that you need to find confidence in yourself to start finding your own formula. And my job is to help you find that formula, but not to give you the formula. That's not really how it works. And until I crossed that road, I was having mediocre results at best until I started realizing, like, dude, I can start shaping my own shit.
Exactly. It's a superpower when you realize it. Yeah. And not to pitch my own program or anything, but it just comes to mind is that's exactly the effects that we focus on as well, because we show people how to shift their paradigm. We show them how to shift who that person that they may think they are, shift it to align it with what they want to create. And then they start discovering their purpose like you did. It's that discovery. Because when you discover the purpose yourself, it changes everything, because now every moment is just infused with so much energy that you're just exerting energy without effort. It doesn't feel like effort anymore. You just make things happen so much more easier.
Yeah. And that's when I learned a really interesting concept that I created for myself. It's force versus flow. So when we set a goal and we want something, we just force and force. And then you can step back and be like, no, what would happen if I just was to flow, right?
Go with the river.
I think, was it Bruce Lee's? Be like the water, just flow. So just flow. And you'd be surprised what the world will bring to you.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the things you can see.
It's so incredible.
Yeah.
You got to operate from your desires. You just have to have that faith and belief. You're just loved so much. He just sends you those guidance, sends you that information. What you need to create that 10x growth hacking is that you get those concepts, you get those ideas, you get those people, you get those opportunities. You start seeing, wait a minute, this is not that difficult. How about any misconceptions about the 10x and the growth hacking? Are there any?
The biggest misconception is people think it's so complex, it's for only a few people. That's not true. Many people believe it's only for tech companies. That's not true. Many people believe it's only for startup companies. That's not true. Many people believe, again, you need like really different mindset to do it. Yes, you need to change your mindset, but it's not impossible. That's the thing. So it's something that anybody listening right now can learn. And it's not that difficult once you get the hang of it. And you will see a huge difference in the way that you do things. And it's just one of those things you need to try. It's just when you figure it out, you can watch all these people talk about 10x and their growth hacks and all that. And what I got to warn you about growth hacking, and I mentioned it earlier, is the most powerful growth hacks in the world are top secret. Nobody will ever tell you them. And purely because of the concept, like I told you, it's like milk. It has an expiry date on it, and they need to exhaust the potential of that growth hack until it expires, until they build the next growth hack and the next one. But usually, even when they expire, they keep them secret because they build on them. And so if you were to Google right now, I want a growth hack, whatever it is, anything you're most likely to find is probably not very potent. And even if you tried it and you did it to the T, and you're like, dude, this didn't work. Well, it didn't work because it's expired. No one is going to tell you the depth of it. The way to look at it, though, is how do I learn from it? What are the mechanics behind it? How did they shift from A to Z or A to B or wherever they went? How can I learn from that and develop from this? Because a lot of these growth hacks, even some of the more technical ones, once the hole is plugged, so part of growth hacking, when we teach us like the 4 things you look at, one of them is identifying a hole or a gap or identifying like a connection. And these exploitations are actually an invitation by somebody who hasn't built a system properly. So if I was to give you the formula to that, everybody would know it. And if everybody knew it, that plug would be closed up pretty quickly. Yeah.
Are there any other tips you can share for anyone listening or watching that they could look at or analyze through their mindset, or some self-reflection that they can go through about their business that could help them find some ideas?
Absolutely. Yeah. My YouTube channel is all free. Like, you'd be surprised. Good. People write back to me like, dude, you don't charge for this. I said, no, that's all free. Everything after that is a different story. But there's everything in there, from tutorials, literally what is growth hacking? How does it work? What are the best tools? Like, we teach things like the 20-minute tool test, right? So it's not about what's the best tool. It's about what can I get in 20 minutes out of a single tool that I try out that can get me to an initial result. That's the best tool. The tool that I told you because it worked for me. That's a different story. Yeah. So I teach things like that. Then there's the 10-day growth hacking challenge, which I highly recommend. You will learn a ton of things from people of all walks of life. Everything from people in the bikini business, believe it or not, all the way to sophisticated industries like fintech and health tech. And you'll see how these entrepreneurs have reshaped the way that their industries work by using the growth sciences. And it's openly available. You can go ahead and learn, and you can even contact them. We put their contacts so you can reach out to them if you wanted to. But it's an excellent starting point. It gets you educated. You can see the mindset that's being used. That you'll see how they're implementing the mindset. And one of the things that I learned through this challenge was that those who had the most success had the least amount of distance between an idea and action. And this will not happen overnight. It happens over time. So you do it and do it and do it. And what you'll notice is the distance between the thought and the action get shorter, and your results start to exponentially come out better and better.
Awesome. No, I love it. Thank you so much for that recommendation, advice,
absolutely,
direction. Great chatting with you. Give meditation a try again. I used to hate it too. I did. I actually could not sit there for that long. But then once you calm the thoughts, then you realize how incredible it is. And I've done 1 hour ones, I've done 1 hour 15 ones, and you don't even realize it just changes everything and how you perceive things. And it'll definitely help with what you're doing. So I appreciate you. Definitely keep in touch. And if there's anything else in the future that you wanted to share, please come back on.
Awesome. Thank you for the open door. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thank you so much.